want to start with USC. Drew, I think you were in Europe by this time. Bud Elliott came on the show. We talked about coaches on the hot seat. Lincoln Riley wasn't one of those names, but we did talk about the state of the program for USC. We ended up talking more about Alex Grinch and that defense at the end of the day. Lincoln Riley makes the change. Alex Grinch out, has been with him for years and years, dating back to his time at Oklahoma. Drew, this was a change that needed to be made, quite frankly. I think you could have made the change 2 years ago, right? Second year, USC, they haven't been able to turn it around. I'll give you some McNuggies here. USC allowing 34.5 points per game this season. That is second worst among Power 5 teams. Lost 3 games in the last 2 years when USC offense scored 42-plus points. Drew, USC, they have 3 defensive players ranked in the top 247, Marcellus Williams, Cam Fountain, and Elijah Newby. When I think about this, I think immediately of short-term ramifications on the field this year. It can't get any worse. I don't have any issue with that. To me, this is such a huge hire because of the timing of going into the Big Ten and the identity of that conference. The other thing about this is if you're Lincoln Riley, when you got that job at USC, to me your mentality has to be, it all comes through us in LA. The West comes through us. It doesn't go through Eugene. It doesn't go through Dan Lanning. It comes through us. The reality right now on the recruiting trail is it does come through Eugene. It does go through Dan Lanning, and it shouldn't be that way. So we've talked about maybe some of the inadequacies of Lincoln Riley recruiting the state of California. You want to talk about Brandon Baker. You want to talk about Aiden Breland. Those guys are off to go play at Texas, go play at Oregon, and there's more and more examples of that as well. Drew, I hate to say this, but this defensive coordinator hire for me, for Lincoln Riley, it has to be, not only can you have the X's and O's and the player development part of this, it almost feels like you got to be the yin to the yang of Lincoln Riley in terms of who's going to bring the toughness, the physicality, the tone-setting nature to this team. He's got to knock this one out of the park, in my opinion.
You know who he needs to find is a Dan Lanning of 5 years ago,
For
right?
sure.
That's what a head coach of the defense that is a killer on the recruiting trail that understands, all right, personnel is what's going to separate us from the rest of the pack. I don't know who that individual is. I haven't had time to assemble a short list, but I'd be looking for guys that have come through, whether it's Kirby's tree, Saban's tree, someone that's young and is going to get it done on the recruiting trail. More specifically so in the front seven. I mean, you mentioned Elijah Newby, Cam Fountain. We like those prospects. We like the long-term trajectory. But they ain't going to come in and play year one, not in the Big Ten. I mean, they are 2-3 years away. So where is the impact coming from? And, you know, Bear Alexander, they bring him in. I thought it was funny. Bear Alexander posted all these photos on his Instagram account from the Washington game. Some fan commented right below it, hey, didn't you allow the opposing team's running back to almost go for 300 yards on the ground? I don't know what the answer is at USC, but it seems like that's what they need, is just a killer on the recruiting trail that has a scheme and system that's going to work.
I don't know how many of those guys exist, right? That's kind of the issue now. It's going to be up to Lincoln Riley and Jen Cohen, the new AD coming over from UW, to get this right. But this seems kind of like, I don't know, an inflection point for Lincoln Riley at USC. It's hard to change identities while you're going into your third season. And we talked about Dan Lanning. We talked about Oregon a lot on this show. They seem to be the one program that is completely hell-bent on building their program like a program that's built like Georgia or Alabama. And I mean that on the offense or defensive line on both sides of the football at the point of attack. We have not seen that from USC. I have no questions whatsoever about Lincoln Riley's ability to put a dynamic offense together, especially starting at the quarterback position. I think he's one of the best quarterback developers of talent in the country. But defensively, Andrew, this is not new, right? This has gone back to his time at Oklahoma. And to me, this says more about Lincoln Riley than it does Alex Grinch, that he has enabled this over the last couple years. And now you see the culture. I mean, there's this clip of Alex Grinch, right, breaking the huddle defensively against Washington. There's not one player responding to him at all. So to me, I bring up culture, I bring up intangibles, I bring up all those things because you're going to need somebody to be a leader of that group. And for a while now, it seems like USC and Lincoln Riley have been saying, okay, you know what, if we got to score 56 points with Caleb Williams going absolutely nuclear, then it is what it is, and that's what we got to do. But the problem is teams have caught up. Oregon with Bo Nix, Washington with Michael Penix, right? These guys can kind of match you toe for toe now. So going to be fascinating what Lincoln Riley and the Trojans do there as well. Drew, any final thoughts on that one before we move on?
Well, I wanted to ask you, is this showing that you can't build a defense through transfer portal additions?
I don't know.
I think at some point,
Go ahead.
I think at some point you gotta have guys that have been there, right? That you've recruited, that have been sitting in the meetings for 2 years, that are ready to go and step up. You know?
I agree. For whatever reason, I think culture and organic team building on the defensive side of the ball is
So important.
It's different than offense. It's not as plug and play, right? You got to have the continuity. You look at LSU right now, a lot of transfers on that defense. You wonder about the pride of that room that used to be called DBU. Is that there? Does that exist? You wonder on the defensive line that what has been one of the best units over the last decade. Is that there for the Bengal Tigers and Baton Rouge? I don't know. They brought in a lot of transfers. I get why they're doing it. Brian Kelly took over 39 scholarships, and you know what? In fairness to Lincoln Riley, he took over a team that needed a lot of roster turnover as well and a lot of expectations for both those programs. But I think you're right. I don't know if there is a Band-Aid fix to some of these positions that are premium positions. We've seen Colorado offensive line. It's not the same, right? I think these are things that you got to get down, got to get dirty, and you got to address in high school, and you got to bring these guys up, and you got to develop as well. So be interesting to see what happens with USC, Lincoln Riley, after the departure of defensive coordinator Alex Grinch.